Hey, are you ready to grow your business? You have checked out the number one resource for business leaders, entrepreneurs, startup founders, and managers. And we're going to teach you how to grow and scale your business with real actionable steps. There's no fluff in this podcast. It's just good advice. Check out this episode. If you're a first-time listener, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. And if you enjoy this episode, leave us a 5-star review. On today's episode, we're talking about the difference between incentives and showing value to your employees. If you want highly motivated, engaged employees, if you want a team that simply gets it and they're making amazing things happen, you absolutely have to understand this distinction. Check out this episode. We have more to talk about. Here comes your good advice. All right. Hey, thanks for checking out another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. I appreciate you tuning in today and checking out another episode on our way to 300 episodes of the Good Advice Podcast, which I almost can't believe. It's kind of crazy. Getting to this point, I mean, we're coming up on 5 years of the show, which thinking back, I think the first episodes I put up, I think I remember the very first episode was something along the lines of what you need to know for starting a business. And this was coming from a guy who had started a business for like 8 days. So there was that. And then also on top of that, I think it was just myself and my wife who were downloading episodes. And, naturally it'd be like, hey, I got another download. It's, my wife downloading on another platform or something to that effect. But all that to say, I won't say much beyond that other than if you've been listening to the show long-term, I want to say thank you. Thank you for checking out the podcast. I hope this has been helpful for your business. I hope it's helped grow and lift your business. That's what we aim to do here. So having said that, just jumping right in, it is a Friday afternoon for me, and so I want to make this a bit short and sweet, or at least as short and sweet as I can. I had a friend of mine, Brian Sexton, in town on Tuesday night. Brian, by the way, has his own podcast called the Intentional Encourager Podcast, has an incredible insight or incredible appreciation for sales in general. He has a book out called People Buy From People, and it's just a really great, it's funny how even timeless it's been when it comes to just the sell, DM, pitch first culture that we're in today. There's some really good reminders in there, so you probably should check out that book. But also on top of that, with Brian, we had dinner together, we recorded a podcast episode, and he casually mentioned this insight that I've been kind of ruminating on for the last few days. We were talking about management, we were talking about leadership, and he said, Blake, too many leaders don't understand the difference between providing incentives and showing value. And I've thought about this a lot lately, actually. I've thought a lot about how true this is. And it got me to the point of even I shared this in my newsletter this week, which was a video on that on my YouTube channel. But I thought about how true this really is and how we as bosses, we as leaders often misunderstand incentives versus value. And so here's what I mean by this is a lot of leaders, they will, in their business, they will default to the perk list when it comes to retaining talent. And so if you ask the average business owner, hey, how do you keep people here? What I often get from people, in fact, I asked this question to someone who was running a fairly large business. I said, hey, tell me about how you retain talent, tell me about your culture. And he's like, oh, we got this awesome break room. And he was joking. He was like, it's got, he wasn't joking. He was speaking very plainly, but very lightly. He's like, yeah, we even got a couple of pinball machines in there. It's really cool. Got a stocked fridge. It's great. And he said all that, and I was kind of waiting for the rest. And he was like, yeah, so that's how we retain talent. And I was really trying to help him along this conversation. And I was like, well, I mean, surely you do more though, right? I mean, surely that's not what, sells people on staying with your business. And to that, he was like, oh, well, yeah, right. I mean, we do a lot of other stuff, but it was interesting that was what he led in with. And it's funny to me, a lot of times we do go to the perk list. Here's the things we do. You can bring your dog to work day. You can wear jeans on Friday. We can, we have free terrible coffee in the morning or, what have you. And I just want to say this. If you're confused with how you run your business, these things do not move the needle when it comes to retention in your business. These things ultimately don't cause someone to stay in your business. Now, I'm not saying to not do these things, so don't misunderstand me. You should absolutely find ways to treat your employees, to give them nice perks and benefits, just small things that can make their life easier. But at the end of the day, you have to understand, and I think you probably do already understand, your employees aren't going to stay with you because you have a pinball machine in the break room. They're not going to stay with you because you have LaCroix or I remember there was one place they were like, yeah, we have sparkling coconut water or something like that. And I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. I'm sure some of your employees really like it, but no one's turning down a major job offer because you have coconut water. Like, let's be real. But so often as business owners, we think that those things are the things that cause someone to stay, and more importantly, to be a highly engaged employee. Now, this terminology here, when we say engaged employee, we're talking about someone who shows up on time, who works hard, who maybe even goes the extra mile, who's a long-term employee. That's what engagement means in this context. So when we talk about creating a highly engaged employee, I hate to break it to you, but the coconut water is not going to do it. So talking to Brian, we were kind of going back and forth in this concept. Is it about the incentives or is it about showing value? And really at the end of the day, that is how you keep people. That is how you motivate people to work hard for you in a business where they really don't have the emotional tie-in that you do as someone who took all the risk in starting the business. So let's talk about the difference here between the perk list, between the incentives, and actually demonstrating value. Well, first things first, if you're going to demonstrate value to someone, how do we most ultimately, at the end of the day, how do we show value? What does it mean to value something? If something has value, what's the easiest connection there? And often it's price, often it's cost. You look at something that has high value, it's typically worth a lot. That's simply how it works. That's just how it is. On the other side of it, if you don't really value something, you're probably not going to spend a lot of money on it. You're probably not going to really break the bank to maintain it, to improve it, to take care of it, because you don't ultimately value it. So cutting straight to the chase, you don't value employees who you pay $7.25 an hour. You aren't demonstrating value to your people. And I start with this because I've worked in businesses and I've worked with customers and clients where we get on the subject of management, leadership. How do I make my team high performing? And sometimes we want to, it's like I talk to business owners where they want any answer but the topic of pay. Like, I forget that. Let's talk like, what's the team building we can do? Like, what about the ropes course? All these different things. And at the end of the day, the biggest way to demonstrate value is actually by paying your people well, sharing profits when the team wins overall, finding ways to advance them in their lifestyle and in their career. And I mean that in the sense of, I don't want my employee worried about their rent. I don't want them worried about their mortgage. I don't want them worried about what they're going to eat that day in terms of their grocery bill. And so part of my attention towards them is not just their what they're doing for me. I'm also thinking long-term career development. How do I help this person become more valuable to me? But I start there because, like I said, so often it's like, tell me anything I can do except pay them more. You just have to understand that pay is directly associated with value. And if you want to value your people, you have to pay them accordingly. Now, moving beyond that, for everyone who's ready to get past that topic, moving beyond that, the way you demonstrate value is the same way you show value to anyone else. Like, do you value your spouse? How do you know? Like, what evidence do you have to show that you value your spouse? You'd probably say, yeah, we spend time together. I listen to them. I treat them with respect and dignity. A lot of these things have the same tie-in with your employees, with your team members. And what gets kind of obnoxious to me about this is I'm not really saying you need to spend all day with your staff to show them value. Because I have people who say things like, Blake, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to spend time with my employees. And these are typically people who aren't even doing the bare minimum. Like, I remember there was a guy who we were literally trying to make this as tangible as possible. And so I was talking about the times he engages with his staff. And I remember his face was like aghast with shock as he was saying, so you're telling me that I'm supposed to go around and spend a few minutes every day talking to my employees, checking in, making sure that they're good without asking for anything for them to do? And I was like, yeah, that's pretty much it. And he was like, that feels like a huge waste of time. And I was like, well, yes, I get that for you. It feels like a waste of time because you're the one who's actually needing, you're the one who's bleeding employees left and right. So of course you don't get it. And for most of you guys who are listening, this is probably like common sense. It's probably a no-brainer. But what often happens in leadership is you have the micromanaging boss. You have the boss who is very parental and crazy with their employees, who don't treat their employees like fellow professionals, like fellow adults. They are oddly, they treat their employees oddly like children, as if they're like, it's like a game of gotcha, or what are you working on? Why would you do it that way? Or, that stuff is, not only is it incredibly obnoxious, it absolutely does not show value. Value to me is on top of just like mutual respect and dignity, which, by the way, are critical. They're crucial for anyone you work with, whether it's an employee or not. Recognizing someone's dignity is key beyond anything. Let's just start there. But what I think it looks like is someone you work with who maybe you have a difference of opinion on the outputs that they have, but you realize at the end of the day that that is exactly what it is. It's a difference of opinion. Not to say there aren't times where I talk to people and I say, well, you know what, we disagree, and here's why I think it's important you change this or you do this differently, like where I'm relying on my own expertise or credibility. But there's also times where I talk to people and they say, you know what, Blake, I don't really mesh with that. I don't think that's the right answer. And I find myself saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to go with your gut here. You obviously know better than I do. Yeah, let's do that. Let's try that answer. Let's do it that way. That only comes with recognizing the value that someone has and brings to the table. So, some food for thought today as you think about your business. How are you showing value to your employees? Or are you just giving them incentives? Are you just giving them the list of perks? So, having said that, that's all we got today. Short and sweet episode. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And don't forget, if you're enjoying the podcast, you want to support the podcast, you can check out our Patreon. If you want to advertise your business on the podcast, you can reach out to me, Blake, at goodadvicecoaching.com. And with all that said, that is today's good advice. We'll catch you later. See ya.